It's great to be here and looking forward to giving you a sort of high-level view of some of the tools and techniques that we use in project management. I was just going to start with a little intro about myself, just to give you a bit more information. So you can see there I'm a leadership coach. I'm also a qualified project manager. So, I'm very much a learning and development professional, but my career has given me the opportunity to lead projects during various roles that I've held. And so my approach to project management is very practical because it comes from both the sort of theoretical and learning side, the tools and techniques you need, but also from experience of running real projects. So I hope that makes the things that I include in my training really useful. So this is a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the skills that we use. So the first thing I wonder is just thinking about this project and this activity. So we've talked before about change and how it's a key element of many successful businesses. And also, that we often find that managers and team leaders are expected to run projects in organisations now. So many organisations won't have a project manager or specialist, but they will be looking for managers and team leaders to run projects. So having some awareness or even some training around this topic can be really helpful, because what it does is, project management, what its goal is about is really making sure that the thing you want to deliver arrives on time, within budget, and there are no horrible surprises. And that's what these techniques help you to achieve. And it's a great way to help people to understand what's involved in a project, and particularly making sure that everyone's expectations are realistic. So lots of projects falter because you had a group of people in a room who all nodded, and then actually when you got into the detail, you found that actually everybody was looking for something quite different from each other. People didn't have a common understanding. So in this webinar, you'll see we're going to look at what are the key stages in any project. So all projects have a particular shape, and they go through particular stages. So we're going to look at those 4 stages. I've included some things around how you can build up a detailed plan, and also then how you can monitor progress and do reporting, and then sort of what might be involved in kind of completing the project. So those are the kind of 4 areas, and I'm going to introduce in each of those some sort of key concepts around each of those areas. So we're starting off here. We like to have a poll. So we've got our first poll here, because it wouldn't be the same without some polls, would it? So I'd just like to understand a little bit about how involved people on the call are with projects. So I've got 4 options here. So I'm not involved with or impacted by any projects. I'm impacted by projects, but I don't deliver them myself. I'm working on a project that someone else is leading, or I'm leading a project for my business. So I wondered if people would like just indicate whereabouts they sit in those. So there's a few more seconds. Has everybody had time to vote? Yeah, we'll broadcast that now. And we can see that nearly half of you are leading a project for your business. So that's a massive percentage. So well done. We've got a lot of people with actually leading project management. So hopefully you'll find this really useful and interesting. So the next section then, we're going to start looking at the different stages. And the first of those, the 4 stages I've defined as being, define, plan, manage, and then review. So defining is about understanding what is this project all about. Planning it is how can I make sure I understand all the activity that's going to need to take place. Managing it is around how am I making sure that that activity is all running on time. And then finally, after you've delivered it, actually reviewing what happened and saying actually these are some things that we've learned that we want to take forward in the next one. So let's look at this project definition. So what makes a project really? So there's some key features that really distinguish projects from what I might call BAU, business as usual activity. So a project will have a definite start and finish date. So you're starting it at this point and you're going to finish it on this point. It will have specific goals and targets that it's going to achieve, and it's likely to have a sponsor, usually quite a senior member of an organisation, who's actually going to help to make sure that it will deliver what it's supposed to deliver and support the project manager, and a dedicated team, so definite people from around the business who are going to help with it. So I'd really say projects are distinct from the everyday ongoing work, the BAU. They're usually introducing something new. Now that might be introducing a new product, introducing a new process, introducing a new system, introducing new people. It could be anything new, or a change to something, and they have a definite finish and close. There's a point at which you say, this project is now completed and finished, and so we're moving on to actually that now becoming part of everyday work, and what's the next project. So I'm really happy to take questions in the question box at any point. So I know Liz will keep an eye out for anything that's coming up for me as I'm talking. So please feel free to add comments and to ask questions, or to say that you have a different perspective, because that's always really interesting as well. So we've got another quick poll now, which is, I wanted to ask, are you in a business that recognises projects in the way that I've just described them? So it's a yes or no answer. So sometimes the word project can be added to what is essentially business as usual work, because it maybe makes that piece of work sound a bit more interesting or exciting, and that's absolutely fine. But I was looking to see whether or not that's the way that people here recognise it. There's a very strong response there to say yes, you do recognise projects in this way. So that's great. So what's project definition all about then? So it's really about creating a common understanding about what the project is all about. So I've put in here some questions that I would commonly ask people about what they're doing. So I think the next slide, so the next click should give us some of those questions. Yeah. So it's understanding what it is that they want. So what are the objectives? What will this project deliver? What information will need to be gathered or reviewed? What will the benefits be? Why are we actually doing it? What resources are we prepared to put to it? Who's involved? Who's impacted? Who are the stakeholders? How will we know it's been successful? So, and at this point, one thing that I would do when I'm having these initial conversations, especially if it's in a group situation, is to actually avoid groupthink and to ask people to write on a post-it note what they think the objectives of the project are, or what they see the benefits are, because that can be a great way to actually uncovering different views of what you're actually doing on a project. So rather than kind of sitting in the room saying, okay, what does everybody think this project's all about and what's it looking to deliver, you may have a sponsor with a very strong opinion, but actually you want to gather other people's opinions as well, and other people sitting in the room might be having a different perspective on what you're doing. So that's just a piece of sort of the way that I would work. I want to ask everybody now, actually, if you've got any ideas of other things that you would ask at this point. So this is before any work starts on delivering your project. Are there any other questions that you'd be thinking of asking at this point? I can see Samantha's typing for us. Timescales. So that's a really good one. So timescales, sometimes you might know that you're working to a specific timescale. Say it's a piece of regulatory requirements, so there's something changing in your industry, you've got to change the way you do things, then you might have a timescale that you're working to. But often at this point it's quite useful not to have an idea about timescale, but to wait until you've actually got all the detail of what's going to be involved before you set those down. Potential barrier to success, yeah, so success criteria, that's a good one as well. Who's responsible for each piece? Yeah. Asking those involved if they have any experience in it. Excellent, yeah, so you've got some great suggestions there. We've also got a little illustration that we're going to bring up now as well, which kind of emphasises the pointing great definition. I don't know whether any of you have seen this before. Yes, can you all see a little cartoon? It's known as what the user wanted. If you don't get your project definition really good. You often come up with inventing something that wasn't really wanted. So this is just quite a funny little cartoon about how the user explained it, how the project leader understood it, how the analyst designed it, how the programmer wrote it, how it was installed at the user's site, and then what the user really wanted. So, there's a massive disconnect there between all the different areas, which it kind of just illustrates. I like it because it illustrates the point that if you don't really get into the detail of what everybody's looking for and why they're wanting to do these things, what the benefits are, you can actually end up with something that doesn't meet anybody's needs. So that was just in there for a bit of fun. And as I say, avoiding a bit of groupthink with some individual meetings. Oh, we're just getting the document back up. That's fine. So, okay, lovely. Thank you. Okay. So, there's another point here as well where put project name obvious or obscure. So some businesses go to great lengths to name projects in a way that means that nobody can understand what they might possibly be referring to. So I worked for one organisation where all the projects were named after footballers, another one where all the projects were named after mountains. So they would be bringing in things, and there's pluses and minuses on both sides. It to my mind, when I'm a bit of a Ron Seal fan. It does what it says on the tin. So if you start to give things funny names, the names get bandied about, people wonder and worry sometimes about what's going on. But there can be good reasons to have something that, if you may be doing an acquisition or something like that, you actually maybe don't want people to know, so you give it an obscure name. So, and sometimes people want to name them for fun. So I don't have a strong view on either way. So if we move on, once all the questions have been asked, then you can start to produce the project definition report. And at that point, I'd recommend a walkthrough of that document with all the stakeholders present, if you possibly can, in the room, face-to-face, and actually some sort of formal sign-off process where people actually say, yes, okay, we're all comfortable with that, and that's minuted, or they sign it in some way. And what that's about, it's about avoiding what I would call scope creep, where you've agreed what you're going to deliver as part of your project, but then as you deliver the project, people say, oh no, we need you to include this and we need you to include that. Actually, it's a document you can go back to and say, no, this is what we said we were going to do, this is what we've agreed to. And you can change your definition, but actually that then, by going back to it, you can then say, but that means that we now need to change these things, and that's going to impact on the project. So it can be a good way to sort of keep an eye on what you're delivering. So I've actually put together a little example project definition report. So I've developed a project. So if I were to treat this webinar as a project, so it's something with a definite start and end, then I might produce a simple document which would be around these. Now, generally, I'd say I'd do a PDR in Word, and it would be at least 2 sides, if not more long. A short project, 2 sides. I have seen project definition reports of 20-plus pages. So the more complex the project is, the more you're going to include. But for those of us that are less familiar with project management, what's the overall goal? So my goal here is to develop and deliver a webinar at Shorebird which gives people a high-level introduction to the concepts of project management. I put in some objectives there. So the session is interesting and informative, covering the 4 key stages. The session includes Q&A. The session incorporates a worked example. Now, I've deliberately left the deliverables blank there because I'd like some people might call them deliverables. So what will this project deliver? Sometimes people call that products. What are the products of this project? So I wondered in the chat box if you'd like to start writing in what you think some of the things I need to deliver as part of this project are. I've also put in my resources. I've put in the benefits. I've also put in some success criteria. So I don't know how I'm doing against my... So the webinar achieves 50 or more attendees. We're on 40 at the moment. So the webinar achieves positive feedback from 75% of employees. So of attendees, sorry. So you can start to add those in. So deliverables. So things that I will have to produce in order to do this. So if I give you an example of one of them might be the briefing document. So ahead of the webinar, I provide Liz with a briefing document that outlines an introduction and the key objectives of the webinar. So that's something that I have to deliver to Liz or produce for Liz. Anybody got any other ideas? A PowerPoint, yes. A slide set, yes, definitely. I need a slide set. Anything else? Documents for referral, instructions on how to join the call. Yeah, so these are all things that I might need to deliver. If we click onto the next slide, you can see the ones that I thought of. So I thought the briefing document was one that I thought, the set of slides, my set of facilitator notes, so the things, the key points I want to pull out. So Charmin, you've put that in with script. Thank you very much. Natalie did instructions during the call. The feedback opportunity, so I might want to make sure that's included. The polls and questionnaires, I need to design and think about those. And then actually the webinar setup, so making sure that we've got a setup on which we can deliver. So any project would have a number of things that you need to deliver, outcomes if you like. So that was just a simple example. So the timescales can be in this document as well. And we talked about timescales a little bit. Somebody asked a question a little bit earlier, so I talked about it on. So there might be an idea of timings here, particularly if there is something that you need to deliver for. That would be really important. But it may be that actually you can set some outline times. We need it within the next 6 months, but actually until you get into the detailed planning and really understand all the complexities of what you're trying to deliver, you won't actually know what those timings are. And then at that point you can then start to say, well, actually, if you want it quicker, we might need more resource, or we might need to think of a simpler solution in order to get it for that time. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the next phase then, so we've kind of got our definition. So now we're thinking about how we're going to plan out this project. So, and I'd really sort of say time spent in planning really helps everybody, you know, actually taking that time out. And the way that I would always do it is with a group of people in a room initially to start with. And working from that list of deliverables is the starting point. So for each of those deliverables, what you're going to need is a list of the tasks to complete it, and then engage the people who understand what work will be involved, which somebody mentioned, and expect to find things no one had thought about. So this is why the times, you know, setting a time scale at the definition stage is quite tricky, because you often, as you start to talk to other people about what needs to be involved and what needs to be done, you find things that you hadn't anticipated. And so when you get into planning, that's the opportunity to start to say, actually, what is the real time scales for this? So I would involve lots of people, one rep from each deliverable. So for example, an IT project where you may be changing something around your systems, you know, you might need training involved, you'd need IT involved, you might need a manager from the area involved, etc. So getting those people together helps you to understand what's going on, what everyone needs to do, who's relying on someone else before they can start the work. So an IT project, the training would need to see the new screens, for example, before they could actually start to build the training. So it might be, in theory, they could start tomorrow with building your training, but actually until IT have built the screens, they can't start to build the training. The next thing, so the way I like to think about project management, I have my own little metaphor that I use, and I like to think of project management as the project manager being the conductor of an orchestra. So you've got the wind section, you've got the brass section, you've got timpani, etc., and people leading all those different parts of your business are involved, and you're the conductor. You're the one that's trying to make sure that everybody's playing their part of the music at the same point. And that's my metaphor for it. So if anybody's got a better metaphor, then I'd love to see it in the chat box, or an alternative metaphor, not even a better one, but that gets you the idea. Yeah, that gets you the idea. But for me, it's an orchestra, and you're the conductor. So that's how I like to think of it. So you can't do all this work yourself. That's the other thing about being a project manager, is you're not the one doing the work often. You're the one who is making sure that everybody else has done the work. It's a key concept. So on the next slide, I've put a very simple, again, working on my worked example, Project Beach Duck. This is one of my deliverables or products, was to develop a slide set for this webinar. So in order to do that, I made a simple list. I need to think about the outline of the content. I need a slide template that will work for it. I then need to put the content in. A cat herder, love it. Put the content in. I need to animate the slides. I need to get them uploaded to Shorebird. I need to write facilitation notes, and then I'm ready to actually deliver it. Against each of those, I've put an approximate amount of time I think it would take me to do that, and then I've put who's the resource. So, for example, a lot of the resource is me. I do have an assistant who can do animation, so I gave that to him to do. Liz uploads slides on Shorebird, so I'm relying on her for that, etc. So, and if you start to build that kind of picture of 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 what's involved, you start to build some of the detail, and it starts as you discuss it with people. They say, "Oh, we need to do this," and sending out the instructions about how to join the webinar. I haven't got that anywhere on there, but it's a key part to this being successful. So that might be something which, if you and I, Liz, had sat down and talked about it, we thought, "Oh, we need to send this out as well." We would have added that in as an item. So on the next slide, we're starting to see how this starts to build up into a project plan. So this is largely based on a Gantt chart. I've just made this as an illustration. There's lots of software that can help you to do this. So what I've done is, thinking about the amount of time I need against other things that I'm doing, is when would I be able to do each of those things. Now, I've done it Monday to Friday across the top. Most ways you would do it, you'd kind of do it week by week, month by month. You change your view. But what this allows you to do is to link it with items that follow each other. So you start to create a view that says, actually, until I've developed the slide template, I can't input the content. So if I'm late developing the slide template and that doesn't start until Wednesday, then it shifts everything else to the right, and I'm not ready for the webinar the following Wednesday. So it starts to give you a really good view of, actually, if people don't do things on time, what is going to be the impact? Or what do I need to do in order to bring that back into? So if I don't get the slide template built on Tuesday, can I do it on Wednesday and then input the content the same day as well, in order and into Thursday, in order not to compromise my actual delivery date? There's some things that can happen even though I don't need to. So, for example, once the slides are animated, they can go to Liz for uploading to Shorebird. It doesn't matter that I haven't written the facilitator notes until Friday, because Liz can have them and I can be uploading the facilitator notes. So that actually wouldn't have mattered. I could have written the facilitator notes this morning. It wouldn't have made any difference. So it's getting this understanding around what happens if something doesn't happen on time. And I would always start this as a paper exercise on a large wall with post-it notes, but then once I've got the picture, I'd put it into some software like MS Project or something, and then when you move things like that, if you were to move the design slide template over to Wednesday, you can start to see everything else would knock across as a result, and you'd see that you weren't going to make a deliverable date. So then you can start to think about how you're going to change that. So can I just ask for some feedback? Is that making sense to people, or is it generating more questions? Because I don't know whether it's things that people have seen before, maybe. Yeah, makes sense. It's good. Great. Thank you very much. Okay. The software I've used is MS Project. There are others, and in fact, there's lots of apps now. If you go on to, like, if you have an iPad, you can actually get apps which do this for you and are probably much more intuitive. If any of you know of any, then please let us know. James, that's a great question. No, a deliverable is not the same as a task. A deliverable, so my deliverable here is my slide set ready to go, and there are a series of tasks that I need to do in order to deliver that product, if you like. So another deliverable might be a training package for something. So there's a number of tasks that you need to do before you can actually deliver that training package, which would include actually delivering the training as well, before you would say that was complete. So if that makes sense, James, could you just type into the box to let us know, or ask me another question? That would be great. So on the next slide, we've got some other ideas. I'm keeping Liz really busy here with both typing and managing the thing. So on here, that's just, as I said, it's just a picture. But once you have this view, it gives you more opportunities as well, because you can start to look at each task and say, what's the earliest date or time I could start that task? So I might have plugged that developing the outline content in for next Monday, but actually, potentially, I could have started it the week before. So knowing what's the earliest point you could, because I wasn't waiting for anything else. So knowing the earliest time you can start something is really helpful. But the earliest time I could start inputting the content wasn't until after the slide template was built. So that was always going to be the earliest time I could start that. Similarly, what's the latest time you can finish something? So if I hadn't been able to complete the input content by the Thursday lunchtime, actually, in theory, I had probably until Monday to complete that to still get it to Liz in time for Tuesday. So there was a later finish, and that difference between when I'm planning to do it and the last point at which I can complete it is what we call float in a project. Those are items that can float further on without any impact to somebody else. Okay, and then there's decisions you can make about if there's something that you need more quickly, what's your opportunities to make it quicker? And often it's around resource. Can you get more people on it? Can you stop them doing something else in order to be available? And where are the dependencies? And by dependencies, I mean who's waiting for something, or who are you waiting for something from? Okay, next slide. So I've just done this to illustrate how you start to build up a picture where you can actually look down it. So if you imagine those headings across the top, instead of days of the week were weeks and months, you can start to see, actually, this is all the activity in this week that I need to make sure is on track. So as the project manager, you start to say focus just down on the Monday column and say, right, is everybody on track with that stuff? It really makes it much easier to manage the project. Because you can see at a glance what's due that day, that week, that month, and you can start to do reporting on what tasks have been completed, what percentage of the project is complete, what tasks are running late, and then we're moving on to our next topic, which is one of my favourites, of risk and issues. So I just wanted to ask there as well if this is giving people a good feel for how it all works, and also this idea of build your program, build that view from the last slide, sorry to go back, build that view on a wall, on a piece of paper, on a large whiteboard, and have it in a place where everybody can come along and have a look at it and start saying, oh, no, you won't be able to do that until you've done this. And your project plan just becomes so much more real to everybody, and people start to understand more about everything that's involved in this project rather than just seeing their own little bit. So that's great. Oh, we've got a question. How do you chase people without being rude? This can be a great facilitator for it, because you can show them the piece of paper with your outline project on it and say to them, right, this is the project, this is where we are, this bit, how are you getting on with it? What's the problems? What's the difficulty? Have you seen that? Do you understand that if this doesn't finish on time, it's going to impact on this next piece and it's going to make them late? What would you need to do in order to get that back on track? That's kind of the way I try to do things with people, is to say to them, is to give them the problem almost, to say, so what ideas have you got for how we can get it back on track? And obviously help them as much as you can. I hope that's a good answer. Okay, people don't complete the track week on week. So I'm going to just leave that question for now, because I'm coming on to that a little bit more, I think, with risks and issues. So the next thing then is risks and issues. So we use something called a RAID log, and RAID just stands for risks, assumptions, issues, and decisions. So risks are things that might happen. So you've got your radar out and you're thinking, actually, what could be a problem? Somebody doesn't finish something on time, could be a problem, it could be a risk. We haven't got enough resource to do this against our BAU. That's a definite risk. So risk is saying everything's okay at the moment, but if Jane was unwell on the day, which is the example I put in here, what would we do? Have we got something in place for that? An assumption is things that you've assumed are correct. So I've assumed that the Shorebird software is working correctly today. Issues, things that have actually happened. So for example, if I wasn't able to park today and I was late, I was late. So it's something that's actually happened. So that's the difference between a risk and an issue. Risk is it might happen, issue is it has happened. And then decisions is recording decisions that we've already made. So for example, we made a decision that today it's an overview and then we're going to ask this audience what they might like in part two. So that's just to give you a bit of a definition of risks. On the next slide, there is an example of what a RAID log might look like. So I've got, this is a risk element, but you can do it for all of them. So let's say the risk is that Jane is unwell. The possibility of that on a scale of 1 to 5 is about a 2, because generally it might even be a 1, because generally Jane's really well. The impact, if it were to happen, is a 4, because actually it would have quite a big impact if I'd rung this morning and said I wasn't able to make today because I was ill. And so overall that gives you a score of 8 because we multiply them. So what actions could we take? For example, we could ring Jane the day before to check that she's all right. Potentially Jane could run the webinar from home if she just wasn't well enough to get here. Or actually we could reschedule the webinar and send out an appointment. So the impact of that overall is seen as moderate, and the moderate is determined by the number in the score section. Let's imagine there's a risk that the slides won't load. So the possibility, we've done it a couple of times before, we're reasonably confident it's all right, so the possibility is quite low. However, the impact of me stood here trying to talk for 35 minutes without any slides is high. That's a high impact. So that's a 10. 2 times 5 is 10. So the options are things that we did. We uploaded them yesterday to make sure they were ready. Potentially we could upload them from another PC, or at the end we'd reschedule the webinar. Sometimes that third option isn't there for another situation. So is the RAID log a living document? Yes, it is. So it would be, it's ongoing. Those scores for possibility and impact will alter as at different stages. So I would be saying, as a project manager, you'd be having at least a weekly meeting with people to review their risk log, their RAID log, and potentially viewing any that are scoring at the moderate and high level in a program meeting, in a project meeting. So absolutely it needs to be. And also you get other people's input into things by doing it that way. So other people have different ways of mitigating those actions. So I'm conscious of time and I want to carry on. So the next slide takes us into, I was going to ask if people have used the RAID log at that point, so if you want to add something. When projects are not delivering to schedule, so this is kind of coming back to the point that somebody said when someone's late, it's about, there's a couple of things that can happen. It can be due to several issues. It could be scope creep, so it could be people starting to shoehorn things into the project that it was never originally intended to do. That's where your project definition report is so important, because you can go back, review it with people. If they want to add those things in, if they're really important, then that's absolutely fine. But that gives you the opportunity to say, yeah, that's okay, but now we need some extra time to deliver X, Y, and Z, or some extra resource. If a project's not on track and it's not down to an individual and then being able to just get that work done, then there are kind of 3 elements to review, and they are around time, quality, and I've called it resource. Some people would call it cost. And on the next slide, you'll see that there's this triangle. If you imagine there's a dot in the middle of it, if your project is running behind time, the type of questions you're starting to ask yourself is if time's important, can you increase resource or compromise the quality in order to deliver your project? And by quality, I don't mean doing a shoddy job. I mean, actually, can we simplify what we're trying to do so that we can get at least part of it or some way towards delivering what we need to deliver by that time? If quality is important, if it absolutely has to be a very high quality product, then can we allow more time for that quality to be developed, or can we increase the resource and the cost to do it? And then if cost is the issue, you haven't got any more money to spend, or you can't allow this to keep going, then can you allow more time or reduce the quality? So that's kind of your three-way triangle of decision making. What can you afford to move? So if you imagine there's a dot in the middle, you've got a problem. Think about which one of those is going to make the biggest difference to you. And then my next slide is the most important slide of all, possibly. Once you get to the end of your project, have a celebration. It's been hard getting there. You've been working hard conducting that orchestra or herding those cats. So, enjoy it and celebrate it. But pick the right time to celebrate. So the fact that you've just completed the last item on the list possibly isn't the right point to celebrate. It's more likely to be when something has been delivered and been in place for some time and you're confident that it's working successfully, and then have a little bit of a celebration then. But make sure you do it. And then the last phase then is on the next slide, which is about review. So once you've got to the point of, there should be some things on there. Sorry. Okay, is handing over that project to the business as usual. So remember we said it has a definite start and finish time, so you hand it over to the business as usual process. Monitor the success over a longer period, so see how the business are getting on with running it. Monitor the success as long as, based on the benefits that it's expected to deliver. And then hold a lessons learned session with all participants. What went well? What could we have done better? What do we need to put in place for next time? Is there anything outstanding or not yet resolved that we need to go back and look at? And then your next question is kind of, what's the next project? I can see a question from James about contingencies. So I think rather than putting contingencies in your RAID log, they'd be more in your planning. Is, if you know that there are some things that you're not going to be sure of, if you get those, look at the deliverables, get the task down to a good low level of detail and put, realistic times in. And one learning that I've had from projects is people generally underestimate the amount of time something is going to take them. So I really work hard with them to say, now, come on, when was the last time you did something like this? How long did it take? Could it take this long? Be generous with them on the times as generous as you can with them on the times that you give them to complete tasks, and be realistic about those. And you're less likely to be getting into contingencies. But some of that timing in there does allow for some contingency. And then that completes my my slide. My next slide is just an overview of those 4 slides, which I like to pop in, and then which you'll be able to see, and then it's any more questions. And also, what's the most useful tip that you've picked up today? Oh, so James, you mean more like an alternative. So if a risk is that someone will be sick and contingency will be, yes, absolutely. So if you put that as a risk, yes, that's it. You've nailed it on the head there, James, because that would be one of your mitigating actions. So in my slide that had the RAID log examples on, the middle section where I was saying, oh, well, what we could do is we could ring Jane the day before, or we could get Jane to run the webinar from home. Those are your contingencies. So yeah, that's great. So yeah, any other questions? We've got a few people typing, and we've got a few minutes left. So one of my questions was, what's the most useful tip you've had today? There's a bit of a race through. And then also we wanted to ask about your thoughts on the next webinar. Yes. Thank you, Helen Jolly, for your comments as well. Really, it's a real rush through. So there's loads more detail behind any of the sections. So yeah, post-its to plan. To have a physical thing that people can move about and show how things go. If you can do it on a whiteboard, then you can actually draw the lines in as well as you're going along. Thank you. I love the RAID log as well. It gets people to think a little bit about what could go wrong, because when we start out on a project, we're all dead excited and everything's going to be fine and it's all going to be perfect. And then when we get into the difficulty and the nitty-gritty, it can be a bit shocking. But if we've actually sat down and thought more about, well, what could go wrong and then what would we do, that can be really helpful. No, James is asking me if a RAID log's the same as a RACI log. A RACI log is more about who's responsible, who's accountable, who's interested. I forget what C is off the top of my head. Somebody will be able to tell me, I'm sure. So they are very different things. They're about who's looking after something, a RACI. So we've got managing the project coming through as a really big area. Oh, we're just broadcasting the results so people can say. So we would need to get into more detail around, just think, so we want to look at managing. Okay, yeah, we'll have a look. If there are any points that people think under managing the project they'd really like covered in more detail or to learn something more about, if you could type those into the box for us as well, because it looks like you might want to get more into RAID logs, more into actually the project plan, and how to work with the project plan. So it'd be useful. I think it's Samantha's comment about its resource and quality doesn't change, but the timescale always moves. Yes. Happy to talk to you about that as well. Okay, so I need to hand you back to Liz, and thank you all very much indeed. It was a great session. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane, and thanks everyone for all the chat coming through there, the questions, the ideas, some useful things for Jane's webinar next. There's our contact details there. Again, if I can just put this event, it will, sorry, when I do close the event, you will get the link automatically, but really appreciate your comments on today. And finally, next week, we've got Paul Addy talking about whistleblowing, which I'm very excited to hear about. So please join us then, or alternatively the week after, we're looking at pushing the legal boundaries with regards to holiday pay and what's happened in the case law. Adam Willoughby, barrister, will be talking to us about that. So if you've got interest there, please join us then. But overall, thank you very much, everybody. We're bang on time, and look forward to seeing you again soon. You'll be getting an email from me shortly. Thank you. Insofar as when is it running, sorry Hannah, I'll just sort of interrupt on that. We have got a date actually, haven't we? Somewhere. I'll send you that on the email so you can log in and have a look at that one as a continuation. Thank you.